Luke 23, verse 44. It was now about the 6th hour, and darkness fell over the whole land until the 9th hour, because the sun was obscured and the veil of the temple was torn in two. And Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. Now when the centurion saw what had happened, he began praising God, saying, Certainly this man was innocent. I'm thankful to Pastor Drew Smith of College Hill Presbyterian Church for pulling this together. You saw Drew in the last video as he shared regarding Jesus saying, It is finished. We have now come to the last word of Christ on the cross. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. As we read this phrase, we know from it that Jesus dies right after saying it. Jesus really died. He didn't fall asleep. He didn't go unconscious from the heat or from dehydration. He didn't go into a coma because of the pain, but Jesus died. And the fact that he died means the tomb being empty on Sunday morning was not a trick. It was not a body that had been moved. It wasn't Jesus waking from a coma or from a deep sleep. It was Jesus being resurrected from the dead. And the fact that he really died and that he rose means that our last enemy has been conquered. It is finished shows our victory over our sin and debt. And into your hands I commit my spirit shows victory over death. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul assures us that if Jesus has risen from the dead, then death has been defeated. It has been overcome. We don't have to fear death anymore. Paul says, Where, O death, is your sting? Where, O grave, is your victory? Death is probably the scariest thing that we face for many of us. It's probably the scariest thing that we face and the hardest thing that we encounter. My dear friend Shaka and Heather Sidnor, some time ago when Shaka's father was ill and was about to pass away, Shaka reached out to me and said, would I be able to come and be with them when that time came? He was making preparation for it, but in spite of making those preparations, he was still completely prepared himself when it happened that day. He wrote a moving tribute that was shared at the funeral, and I share some of this with his permission. He addresses his dad and he says, Dad, tomorrow is going to be the hardest day that I will face because it will be my first day on earth without you. He talks about how sad he is that he won't get to watch their favorite sports teams let them down again. He is sad that he will have to live the rest of his life without the guidance and wisdom that his dad has given him. But he transitions about 2/3 of the way through the tribute, and he says, I'm thankful that you are no longer in pain. And then he says, tell the man who taught him how to cut hair in heaven that he says hello and that Shaka misses him. And he tells his dad to say hello to the baby that Shaka and his wife Heather had passed away before being born. The pain and the joy of death. The pain of I won't get to see you anymore, but the joy of you are already seeing folks there and I will see you when I get there. Into your hands I commit my spirit is an assurance that Jesus died. And if he died, then he really did rise. And if he rose, then we have the assurance that we will rise with him and we will live with him. So we no longer have to fear death. It is still hard. It is still painful, but we don't have to fear it because we have overcome. It is finished means our sin debt has been paid in full. Jesus' work is accomplished. We are no longer guilty. We have the receipt that says tetelestai on it. It's been taken care of, and on that receipt is the cross. And into your hands I commit my spirit indicates that Jesus really did die a physical death, which means he really did physically rise from the dead. The stone has been rolled away. Mary and Martha and all of their diligence showed up that morning. I'm not sure. I wonder sometimes, how did they plan to roll the stone away to get to the body? I have no idea how they were going to do it, but one thing I've learned, being raised by a strong woman and being married to an amazing wife, is that they would have found a way. I tell my kids all the time, I can't do it, but you have to ask Mom. I'm sure she can make it happen. They would have found a way, but it wasn't necessary because when they arrived at the grave, they found the angel sitting there having breakfast, probably somewhat startled by them running up in haste. And he asked them, what are you doing? Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is risen indeed. And because he is risen, we no longer fear death. He has overcome the final enemy for us. As we often sing, death could not hold you down. You are the risen King. And I want you to know that it's a process. We're all growing in these things. We can be assured today that everything that Jesus said and has done and is true. And if you're listening to this and you've not had your sin debt canceled, if you've not had it as finished written on your list of sins, if you've not accepted Christ and received his promise of no fear in death, then right now watching this, you can do that. You can ask Jesus into your life, and you can know that your sins are canceled, and you can know that you no longer have to fear death because you have the assurance of living with him in eternity.